Then there was the mythology aspect. It was mostly based around King Ghidorah in this film. There was a little bit about Mothra, a line of dialogue dedicated to Rodan being a fire demon. But most of the mythology was based around King Ghidorah this time. And I think it was done pretty well. I mean, it was a little too much in your face, but the idea that they put all this knowledge together, and it was almost like an esoteric teaching that where they were kind of like, oh, we thought history was this way, but now we understand history was actually talking about King Ghidorah, all this ancient religion. So what does this movie do for the MonsterVerse? Well, it left Rodan alive. Mothra died, but we have Rodan. Godzilla vs. Kong. I would love to see a parallel to the scene where Kong was on top of the Empire State Building fighting the airplanes. I would like to see Kong on a mountain this time, fighting Rodan swinging by instead of the planes. Speaking of Godzilla vs. Kong, they didn't really set up anything for that. They mentioned that Kong was being affected somehow by King Ghidorah and that he may have escaped Skull Island. But we didn't see him. The post-credit scene wasn't even dedicated to him, which we'll come back to that in a second. But they really left it vague about how this battle between Kong and Godzilla turned out. Although, marketing for Godzilla vs. Kong just started kicking in, and there's a new teaser poster that just came out this week. The tagline is, "One shall fall." But back to Godzilla King of the Monsters. The post-credit scene, I kind of figured out what was going on like halfway through. The terrorist organization that was in this movie who doesn't even have a name, they are revealed at the end of the post-credit scene as looking into buying a leftover piece of King Ghidorah's head. I believe the director said he was interested in Biollante being in a sequel. I'm not 100% sure that's what he said or what they're going for here. But perhaps, I mean, what else are they going to do with the head of a King Ghidorah? Turn it into a biological weapon. Maybe they're going to try to regenerate it, bring King Ghidorah back. It was really left open to interpretation. There was actually a line of dialogue in that post-credit scene where he said, stuff like this is getting hard to come by. So I guess that implies that some time has already passed since the ending of King of the Monsters. And finally, for the future of the MonsterVerse, the movie does hint that Godzilla is going to take a turn to the dark side eventually. There's a line somewhere along the way that says, at least he's on our side, and the other person replies, for now. In regards to the MonsterVerse, I'm afraid that this movie did a great disservice to the MonsterVerse. Gareth Edwards laid out a movie that was to stand alone, but also developed a organization, Monarch, which Kong Skull Island built around that. And this continued the story, but at the same time, it kind of just threw everything at you, hoping something would stick. And while it did expand upon the legendary MonsterVerse in many ways, it did so sloppily. And I'm afraid that Legendary is going to look at this and give up wanting to continue the story the way that they are, and that the continuity may become extremely sloppy. And I'm afraid we're looking at the new Transformers, the new Bayformers franchise, unfortunately. Especially because TOHO's been working with the Shin Godzilla project and the spin-offs that they want to do to give Godzilla a more respectable stance with his films. And here, Legendary is just kind of sloppily throwing everything out there, and it's very disappointing. However, for whatever damage it does to the Legendary MonsterVerse, it does a great service to the future legacy of the Godzilla franchise as a whole. Like I said, there's aspects of this film that TOHO will definitely be using for their interpretation of the films in the future. And that's great. I think even when we look back at some of the worst Godzilla movies ever made, you look at that and say, hey, that was terrible, but it helped make Godzilla what it is. And that's what this movie is. It's a mess, but it's character growth for Godzilla, if nothing else. So my final verdict here. Whenever I was a kid, my favorite Godzilla movie was Godzilla vs. Gigan. It was non-stop action with very little plot, and that's probably why I almost hate that movie nowadays. I don't hate it, but it's one of my least favorite, because while there is action, it's got King Ghidorah in it, it's got Gigan in it, there's little there to stimulate your mind, and it's hard to get through that whole movie nowadays when there's not much going on except the second half of the movie just being a big monster brawl. Kids love that, and some people truly want that, but I just want more, because I know Godzilla can have more. The original 1954 Godzilla proved that. Shin Godzilla was an awesome remake of that. Those movies prove that a good Godzilla movie can be done, and it can be something, a story that's genuinely worth your time in telling. I think 20 years from now, Toho will still be influenced by the path that King of the Monsters laid down. However, I don't think it did anything for the monster versus longevity. And unfortunately for that, I gotta give Godzilla King of the Monsters a 5 out of 10. It hurts, it really does. I think what hurts the most about it is the fact that this was a 5-year wait for this movie. And it still feels like they waited till like the last year and just threw it all together. Which they kind of did. It was a 5-year wait, and 2 of those years they didn't even work on it because they were waiting for Gareth Edwards to return, and he never did. The people saying that Godzilla King of the Monsters is the best Godzilla movie ever made are either caught up in the new hype surrounding it and they need to give it more time, or maybe they're telling the truth in their opinion, and this is what they always wanted, was just dumb monster fun. And that's what some people want. I'm happy for them. They got that. But I want Godzilla to last a lot longer and not end up in the drain and become lower quality again. I'm not ready for that. I waited my entire childhood for a realistic Godzilla. We got that in Godzilla 2014, just not enough of it. And then here we are 5 years later, and it's turning into a joke already. At the end of the day, I walked out of the theater still feeling isolated as a Godzilla fan. I wanted the rest of the world to see what I saw in Godzilla with this movie. I thought it was going to be something that people would look at me and say, hey, you were right. You were right to be watching Godzilla all these years. This is awesome. And then I could say back to them, well, no, some of the movies are really cheesy, but these newer ones are really good, and there's some few classic ones too. But unfortunately, this isn't it. And I don't think Godzilla vs. Kong is going to be much better. I think it'll be an improvement somewhat, but especially with as late in the production stage as it already is. It's already in post-production. I think the film's finished. If the MonsterVerse continues after Godzilla vs. Kong, Legendary needs to take his time and figure out how to get a good story going again here. Especially with Toho investing in Legendary and all these other studio companies here in America. You would think that they would really want to step in and say, hey, you got to put together a little bit better of a story here next time. But hey, Musties, before you go, I want to remind you that I'm starting my Godzilla movie review marathon, and this is technically the first of it, although I'll probably come back in a year from now and redo this just to see how my opinion has changed. But from now up until March 2020, when Godzilla vs. Kong comes out, I'm going to be reviewing every single live-action Godzilla movie, including the Rodan film and the Mothra films and all the other spin-offs in the Toho universe, including the Hollywood films too. So keep posted on that. I'll have a playlist for them. And I want to thank you guys for bearing through this with me. Let me know how you feel about King of the Monsters. Was it a mess for you? Did you still have fun? Did you like most of it and hate a little bit of it? Did you hate most of it and love a little bit of it? Did you feel like it was the greatest thing you've ever seen? Why? What was your favorite part of it? Giant Musties, thanks for watching.